Welcome everyone to the program. We're coming to you from the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And today on Firstpost America, China exports its soft power. Apple seeks to regain its footing with the launch of its new iPhone, and blue cities in the crosshairs. These and other stories on the way, but we begin with the latest headlines. Nepal's prime minister resigns after 2 days of violent anti-corruption protests. The demonstrations were led by Gen Z protesters, which resulted in 19 deaths and over 400 injured. Thailand's top court rules that former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra must serve 1 year in jail, and another major blow to the powerful family that's dominated Thai politics for 2 decades. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says a Russian strike in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region has killed at least 20 people. The Ukrainian leader posted a video from the scene on X. Israel's military says it will act with great force in Gaza City and tells residents to leave as it steps up a deadly assault on the Palestinian territory's largest urban center. And Ethiopia officially inaugurates the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, marking the completion of Africa's largest hydroelectric project after 14 years of construction. China has sent a naval ship to the South Pacific and Latin America, a region known as America's doorstep. According to China's Ministry of National Defense, the military deployed the hospital ship Silk Road Ark on a mission codenamed Harmony 2025. China says the ship, which was commissioned in 2024, will carry out medical services and cultural exchange activities, part of China's efforts to strengthen ties with countries in the region and advance the concept of a shared maritime and global community. Now, the outreach comes amid heightening tensions between Washington and Caracas. Moreover, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has been deepening ties with Beijing economically, technically, and over AI. In fact, in a symbolic gesture, the Venezuelan leader showcased a Huawei phone gifted by Chinese President Xi Jinping, stating that it cannot be hacked by U.S. intelligence.
Impressive. I find out everything through this. The phone that Xi Jinping gave me. Look, Xi Jinping gave me this. A Huawei, the best phone in the world. And the Americans can't hack it. Neither their spy planes nor their satellites.
Impresionante. Ahí me llega todo por aquí.
Now, tensions in the Caribbean have escalated sharply in recent weeks. And last week, a U.S. military strike sank a vessel in the Caribbean reportedly belonging to the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, killing 11 people. Washington described the vessel as transporting massive amounts of drugs, while President Trump hailed the action as a warning to traffickers. In response to the U.S., Venezuela has mobilized its forces, with the defense minister declaring that Venezuela remains vigilant as the U.S. scales up its military presence.
All the deployment of destroyers targeting Venezuela, the use of drones, the use of helicopters on the decks of ships, we are observing all this here from Venezuela. We are observing it because we are people who are vigilant, alert, not frightened, not afraid. But we are on constant alert, watching for any situation that could affect our physical security and threaten our sovereignty.
Now, in response, President Maduro has ordered a sharp increase in troops along the key coastal states. About 10,000 troops have already been deployed to regions bordering Colombia, and with an additional 25,000 troops being sent to other major drug trafficking routes. The U.S., meanwhile, has reinforced its presence with over 4,000 Marines and sailors, 7 warships, a nuclear-powered submarine, reconnaissance jets, and an additional 10 F-35 stealth fighters deployed to Puerto Rico. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth told sailors and Marines on a warship off Puerto Rico that they were not deployed to the Caribbean for training, but instead sent to the front lines of a critical counter-narcotics mission. Amid the standoff, China has voiced opposition to U.S. intervention, emphasizing that it opposes the use or threat of force in international relations and foreign interference in Venezuela. So as the Caribbean becomes a hotspot for military and diplomatic maneuvering, all eyes remain on the deepening relationship between Xi's China and Venezuela's Maduro. And here in the U.S., the Trump administration has officially launched a sweeping new immigration enforcement initiative, marking yet another flashpoint in the ongoing confrontation between the White House and Democratic-led states and cities. The Department of Homeland Security announced that the latest crackdown, known as Operation Midway Blitz, will focus on what it calls the worst of the worst criminals in Illinois. The announcement comes after a weekend of escalating rhetoric in which President Donald Trump repeatedly threatened to deploy the National Guard into the state, sparking a fierce public clash with Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker. Now, according to DHS, the ICE operation is being carried out in direct response to what federal officials describe as sanctuary policies in Chicago and throughout Illinois, which they claim have allowed undocumented immigrants to avoid accountability.
We're out here doing our operation with our surge, and mainly because of to catch the criminal alien population that sanctuary city policies attract these criminal aliens. We want to get them out of the city, make the public safe, help with national security, and to make sure that everybody in this community is safe, no matter what they feel or how their political views. We're here to make everybody safe.
DHS also put out a list of what it called the worst criminal aliens who were released on Illinois streets due to Governor Pritzker's policies. In a statement posted online, DHS stated the initiative is being launched in honor of Katie Abraham, a 20-year-old Illinois woman who was killed in January in a hit-and-run incident involving an undocumented immigrant.
For years, Governor Pritzker and his fellow sanctuary politicians released Trend Aragua gang members, rapists, kidnappers, and drug traffickers on Chicago's streets, putting American lives at risk and making Chicago a magnet for criminals. President Trump and Secretary Noem have a clear message. No city is a safe haven for criminal illegal aliens. If you come to our country illegally and break our laws, we will hunt you down, arrest you, deport you, and you will never return.
After the operation kicked off, a video posted on social media showed federal agents detaining a man and walking him away in handcuffs. Governor Pritzker, however, has fired back almost immediately, accusing the Trump administration of bypassing local leaders and failing to coordinate or even communicate about the scope of its operation.
Once again, this isn't about fighting crime. That requires support and coordination. Yet we've experienced nothing like that over the past several weeks. Instead of taking steps to work with us on public safety, the Trump administration's focused on scaring Illinoisians.
The stepped-up offensive in Illinois is only the latest in a series of federal crackdowns targeting Democratic-led cities across the country. Already, National Guard troops, some of them armed, are patrolling streets in Washington, D.C., despite figures confirming that crime levels in the capital are the lowest in 3 decades. Meanwhile, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday sided with the Trump administration, allowing immigration raids in Los Angeles to continue, giving agents full authority to carry out patrol and to stop and profile individuals based on appearance in Southern California. In Chicago, Trump's threats over the weekend of sending in National Guard troops triggered thousands of protesters to march in the streets. While the president later tried to temper his words by insisting he was not going to war but merely cleaning up American cities, the demonstrations revealed widespread concern among residents about how this enforcement could, in fact, play out on the ground.
We're not going to war. We're going to clean up our cities. We're going to clean them up so they don't kill 5 people every weekend. That's not war. That's common sense.
And with the standoff between Washington and Illinois leaders only deepening, the country is left to wonder, will this operation remain limited to immigration enforcement, or is it the opening act of a much larger federal intervention in America's cities? President Trump is facing heavy criticism after downplaying domestic violence, calling it a little fight with the wife and arguing it shouldn't count in crime statistics. His remarks have outraged survivors, advocates, and social media users who say the president's words trivialize a serious and growing crisis. New figures show that while homicides are down 17% and robberies have fallen by 20% in the first half of 2025, domestic violence is the one crime on the rise, increasing by 3%. Here's more from the fallout.
US President Donald Trump sparked outrage over a recent comment that suggested that some cases of domestic violence were lesser crimes and should not be counted in crime statistics. The president backed up his statement by saying that his opponents were using reports of a little fight with the wife to undermine his crackdown. Here is what social media users are saying. One user compared Trump's speech to total brain decay material. Some also called the speech a disrespect to victims and disgusting. One asked in disbelief how could he speak about domestic violence so casually, while one compared him to Putin by stating that Trump does what the Russian leader does first. According to the US Department of Justice, domestic violence is not a little fight. It is a serious pattern of abusive behavior used by one partner to gain or maintain control over another. Abuse can take many forms: physical, sexual, emotional, psychological, financial, or technological. These actions can intimidate, humiliate, coerce, and terrorize victims. Domestic violence is not only real, it is rising in the United States of America. According to reports, about 10 million people experience domestic violence every year, with women constituting approximately 73% of victims. In the first half of 2025, domestic violence incidents rose 3% compared to the same period in 2024 across 42 major US cities tracked by the Council on Criminal Justice. February 2025 saw a 15% jump, while March was at 6% in reported domestic violence compared to the year before. By contrast, other violent crimes dropped. Homicides by 17%, aggravated assaults by 10%, gun assaults by 21%, and sexual assaults by 10%. Domestic violence is one of the most underreported crimes in the US. Many survivors remain silent out of fear, shame, or lack of support. For decades, advocates have fought to push domestic violence out of the shadows, framing it as a public safety and public health crisis. At a time when data shows domestic violence climbing, while other violent crimes decline, the last thing America needs is a leader belittling the issue.
And now in France, where another prime minister has fallen, ousted by parliament, and is now set to resign. This marks 4 prime ministers in just 12 months. Each leader tried to steady the ship, but one after the other, they were swept away by a divided parliament. And behind it lies a bigger worry: France's soaring debt, which is now at 3.3 trillion euros or $3.94 trillion. President Macron must once again search for someone to lead, but can he find a prime minister who lasts long enough to bring stability? Here's more from what's happening in France.
France is in crisis again. Prime Minister François Bayrou has been toppled. Parliament voted 364 to 194 against him. His government lasted just 9 months. But before being ousted, Bayrou had a bold plan: cut 44 billion euros, which is around $51 billion in spending to tackle France's debt. However, it failed, and instead of backing him, lawmakers rejected him. He formally resigned today.
I think we have shown an image of the Republic that is honorable and active. And so, from that point of view, I wanted, on behalf of the government, to thank the National Assembly and, as Prime Minister, to thank the members of the government.
Now the pressure is on President Emmanuel Macron. He must pick a new Prime Minister. This will be his 4th in just a year and his 7th since he began his 2nd term. His previous choices, Gabriel Attal and Michel Barnier, also fell to no confidence votes. France has rarely seen such repeated government collapses. And now, Macron needs someone who can survive in a fractured parliament. But Macron's struggle is not just to find a new prime minister. The sword of resignation is hanging on his head too. After Bayrou was ousted, several unionists gathered in the French province of Clermont-Ferrand. The protesters cheered the no-confidence vote in the parliament, and while toasting with beer and wine, they called for the French president's resignation.
Well, what we're waiting for is change, obviously. What we're waiting for is change. Now that the change of the Prime Minister is a done deal, they need to get rid of what's higher up, and that's a message for Macron.
Now, Macron's resignation pitch stems from last year. His gamble to dissolve the National Assembly in June 2024 backfired. Back then, he hoped to strengthen his centrist bloc. Instead, the parliament is left divided.
Le Premier Ministre.
And Bayrou's downfall shows why. France's deficit hit 5.8% of GDP last year, far above the EU target of 3%. Public debt now stands at 3.346 trillion euros, which is about 3.94 trillion US dollars, or 114% of GDP. Debt servicing takes up 7% of the budget. Which means, without change, France risks losing its economic freedom. But who could replace him, the Prime Minister? Macron could choose someone from his cabinet, like Justice Minister Gérald Darmanin or Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu. And another idea is cohabitation, a Socialist Party Prime Minister. Olivier Faure has shown interest. But with Parliament so split, any government faces the same danger as Bayrou's.
Within this perimeter, which is that of the left that wants to govern, it is up to him to choose the Prime Minister, who will have his approval, and who will then, on the basis of what we have defined, be able to govern and move forward, because that's the name of the game. There's a proposal on the table. It certainly offers a different perspective on the future, and I think it deserves to be discussed.
On the other hand, calls for snap elections are growing. Far-right leader Marine Le Pen wants Macron to dissolve the assembly. Even far-left Jean-Luc Mélenchon is calling for him to resign. But Macron has vowed to stay in office until 2027. France is now facing a perfect storm: rising debt, a divided legislature, and protests at home. The next Prime Minister will inherit a poisoned chalice, tasked with passing a tough budget and keeping the government alive. The big question is, can Macron find someone who can last, or is France headed for yet another snap election? Time is running out, and the next move may define the rest of his presidency.
Apple is preparing one of its most anticipated product launches of the year as the company gets ready to unveil the iPhone 17 lineup with enhanced artificial intelligence features at its annual event on Tuesday. The centerpiece of the event is expected to be the ultra-thin iPhone 17 Air, which will replace the current iPhone Plus lineup. Measuring just 5.5 millimeters at its thinnest point, it might be the slimmest iPhone ever created. However, the compact design is expected to come with trade-offs, including a single rear camera and a smaller battery. Alongside it, the standard iPhone 17 is expected to feature a much improved 24-megapixel front camera and promotion 120 Hz displays across the entire range. And the Pro models might introduce a redesigned pill-shaped camera bump, enhanced telephoto zoom, and lighter aluminum backs. Prices are expected to begin around $799, with more advanced models costing just over $900. The event is expected to highlight the Apple Watch Series 11, the Apple Watch Ultra 3, and AirPods Pro 3. Now, all of this comes at a critical moment for Apple, not only because the iPhone remains its biggest revenue driver, but because the company is under mounting pressure to prove that it can compete in AI while maintaining its dominance in consumer hardware. Among Apple enthusiasts, initial responses were largely positive regarding the iPhone 17 lineup. The orange and blue colors of the new iPhone series were trending on social media. However, Apple has struggled with impressing its customers with AI features. It introduced Apple Intelligence late last year, but the features underwhelmed users, particularly the long-awaited improvements to the Siri voice assistant, which users said remained basic. The Tuesday event marks the company's opening phase of a reported 3-year transformation strategy that's designed to address and reinvent the tech giant's hardware ecosystem. However, analysts say that Apple would need to iron out how to pack batteries and cameras into its thinner device and seek to price it accordingly to attract customers. Now, what makes this launch especially important is that it's seen as the beginning of Apple's long-term roadmap, with reports suggesting that next year could bring the company's first foldable iPhone. According to tech analysts, a foldable phone is important for Apple to appeal to its customers in China, where consumers like foldables, and the company has been losing market share. And looking ahead, Apple reportedly plans to integrate AI into online search next year alongside a Siri overhaul, though the company has not confirmed these reports. The company is, however, hoping the new product launch will be enough to restore Apple's momentum, regain investor confidence, and position the company at the forefront of the AI revolution. And from all of us here at Firstpost America, we certainly thank you for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks everyone for watching. Welcome everyone to the program. We're coming to you from the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And today on Firstpost America, China exports its soft power. Apple seeks to regain its footing with the launch of its new iPhone, and blue cities in the crosshairs. These and other stories on the way, but we begin with the latest headlines. Nepal's prime minister resigns after 2 days of violent anti-corruption protests. The demonstrations were led by Gen Z protesters, which resulted in 19 deaths and over 4